Welcome to Less Than 15, a show for busy business owners brought to you by DFK Australia, New Zealand. Each week we deliver bite-sized, actionable insights from industry experts so you're across the issues that really matter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus. Let's dive into this week's topic. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Less Than 15 podcast. Today we are joined by Melissa Healy, who is the Senior Manager of DFK Everills in Canberra and also the Director of Everills Wealth. Now, the thing we are digging into here today is what happens if, as a business owner, you're suddenly not there. This is all about estate planning. Now, you've probably thought about estate planning for yourself. Most people, we hope, have already got a will organised, but there's another whole side to this question, and that's about estate planning for you, your business, and its continuation if something unusual happens. And that is what Melissa is here to help us demystify today. So thanks so much for your time, Melissa.
My pleasure.
Okay, well, I think probably the thing for us to talk about first and foremost is how do you define estate planning for business owners as opposed to the general population? What's involved and why is it important to consider it?
I guess estate planning is important for business owners because it's not just if something happens to you such that you've passed away, but it's what's happened if you've become incapacitated, who's going to hold the fort and keep your business stable. And of course, if something has happened to you more permanently, then it's a case of how does all of that get wound up nicely and sold on to the next owners of the business. But the important thing for business owners, regardless of the size, your business is probably your biggest asset, and your family's financial future may therefore depend on how much you can get out of selling if something has happened to you. But you also need to be aware that running a business is complicated, and in the event that you're not around, there can be a whole stack of complex, expensive legal and tax issues that can arise if it's not dealt with properly. And your family's going through enough drama at the time. The last thing they need is problems working out who's responsible for keeping the business going. So making sure that you've got a clear plan, whether it's a short-term or a long-term issue, making sure that the whole thing is documented and people know what they need to do if there is ever any drama. And that way you, your family and your business can be protected as best as possible.
Well, that sounds like a high incentive to pull out a pen and start taking notes, everybody. But rest assured, we also have a very handy resource for you today. It's a business continuity and estate planning checklist that you'll be able to download from the podcast page, or if you're in the app, there'll be a link there. Okay, so when we were talking earlier before we hit record, you were explaining that there is looking at the short to medium term risks that we need to be aware of, and then the medium to longer term, and then also the type of business structure that you have. And those are the two core things to wrap our heads around. So can we have a look at what are the short to medium term risks that having this estate planning in place would take care of?
I guess a lot of people think of estate planning as just what happens when you pass away. But if you haven't passed away, then your will doesn't even come into effect. So what you normally should have in place as every individual is some sort of either a power of attorney or an enduring power of attorney, so that somebody can make financial decisions for you while you're still alive. So this is the problem. A lot of business owners think that they've got a will in place, or if they've passed away, it'll all be sorted out in the will. But what happens more often is that there is this phase in between where an enduring power of attorney needs to hold the fort. And regardless of whether you're still here or not, there is this critical initial period where the business needs to be stabilized to preserve the value of the business and, obviously finish jobs in progress, make sure your team's looked after, suppliers are paid, and all those kinds of things. So there is this phase while you're still alive but can't work and need to sort things out or have someone sort things out for you. So the estate planning for business owners looks a little bit different depending on whether you're a solo entrepreneur and whether that's as a sole trader or as a sole director shareholder of a company, or whether you've got business partners. But either way, if you're still around, it's a case of having estate planning documents like an enduring power of attorney, appointing somebody to run the business for you while you're not capable of doing that. If you have actually passed away, then the legal personal representative, your executor in your will, or you can nominate somebody else in your will to say, right, this is the person I want to hold the fort for me and tidy everything up. So depending on the size of your business, all business owners should consider having some sort of in case of emergency file where you can provide detailed instructions about who is authorised to take over, what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. So authority limits, for example, how much stock are they allowed to buy or things they're allowed to spend money on. The key people to contact, e.g. their accountant or a business advisor, the bank manager, key team members, clients or suppliers. And it can even include passwords to your business software, whether that's job tracking or your debtors system, so that people know who to chase to make sure you get paid.
Is there the enduring power of attorney? And I understand that for like a will situation. We had one of those with my mum. Do we have a separate enduring power of attorney for the business, or are they completely separate documents?
I believe, depending on your business structure, they can be in the one document, but there is certainly something called a company power of attorney. So 9 times out of 10, most people would have a separate person who's appointed. So, for example, you'd appoint your spouse to make your medical and personal care decisions, but you'd appoint somebody else to make the decisions about how the business is to run and pay the bills and hold the fort for you on that front. So you probably would have 2 separate enduring powers of attorney. And the difference between a power of attorney and an enduring power of attorney is that the enduring one only comes into effect once you've become incapacitated. So the person, the attorney that you've appointed, has to have a doctor's certificate and the document to go together to say they're incapacitated, I need to act on their behalf.
Okay, got it. Okay, so we've got our ICE file, our in case of emergency file, with all of
business
those
continuity file, whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
I like that business continuity file. That sounds a bit more pro.
Yes, exactly.
So we're taking care of those short to medium term risks there. Is there anything we've missed there before we look at the medium to long term?
I suppose if you're in business with other people, so a partner in a partnership or a company with co-directors and co-shareholders, hopefully you've already got a partnership agreement in place or a shareholders agreement. You might even have a buy-sell agreement in place. So it's very important to look at those documents because they should have details in them about what happens when a part owner of the business becomes incapacitated, short term, for example, versus what happens if you're not able to come back to work at all or can't come back to work at all. Then what's the process then of transferring your share of the business to the other co-owners? So those are the other important documents that you need to look at to make sure that those detail what is supposed to happen if something happens to you.
Okay, and is there any other structures to be aware of here? So we've got the sole trader, we've got the partnership. Is there any other scenarios that might be different from either of those?
Yep. So the most common structures are obviously sole trader, where you're the only owner of the business assets and liabilities. So in a worst case scenario, that's then your estate's responsibility to deal with those business assets, your legal personal representative or executor. If you're a director, shareholder of a company, you need to be aware that your company continues to exist, but instead of you owning the shares personally, if you've passed away, then it's your legal personal representative, the executor of your estate, that now owns those shares. Yep. And you've got to go through a whole process then of selling the shares, or maybe it's a case of the assets get sold out of the business to somebody else and then the executor has to wind up the company. So there's a couple of issues to watch out for there. And then partnerships and or multi-director shareholder companies. Some people might also operate through a family trust. Yep. And again, it will depend on whether you as an individual are the trustee of your trust or whether you've got a company as trustee of your trust, because it adds that extra layer of asset protection when things go wrong. But again, you have to appoint a replacement director of that trustee company so that they can then continue to manage the trust on your behalf. And if you have passed away, again, whenever there's a company involved, it's always the shareholders that inherit the shares, or they get transferred to the legal personal representative executor of your estate. And whoever the shareholder is, they're the ones who have the power to appoint the replacement directors. And that's certainly something, as a sole director, you need to be very careful of. If you're the sole director and you become incapacitated, then who's going to be the replacement director? And there's forms to fill in with ASIC to organise that change of directors. The shareholders can stay the same until you know what's happening on that front. But at least in the first instance, you have to be very careful to make sure that ASIC's advised if you're incapacitated and there's a replacement director.
So it sounds as though there's lots of T's to cross and I's to dot. So if our listener is realizing, I haven't done any of this, what is the first step to take right now?
Take some time out and think about the practicalities of what would happen if you weren't around, short-term or long-term. Who is going to hold the fort for you? Get that file organised. And as part of doing that, then it's a case of talking to your accountant, because they know about your business and the things that you might need to think about. You might also want to think about, for example, if something did happen, if you don't have co-owners, maybe you've got a key person running the business. So maybe it's a case of doing a deal with them, or talking to your family and saying, look, Fred's been my 2IC for years. If he wants to buy the business off the estate, then he can do that. You might want to nominate a value. It might be at a discount, for example, because he's held the fort while all this drama's been happening. You might even want to say that there's a bit of a payment plan. So when something happens and all of a sudden you're given this opportunity to buy a business, you've got to come up with the money. So there might be a vendor finance kind of arrangement that you can put in place to say, well, he can run the business and he's got 2 years to pay back the estate in monthly instalments out of the profit that he's making. So all that kind of information about who the business might go to in those circumstances might be applicable. But otherwise, look at your buy-sell agreements or shareholders agreement or partnership agreement when you've got co-owners, because hopefully there's some information in there as well about the process of, if you can't come back to work within a reasonable time frame, there should be some rules in those agreements that say, all right, sorry, mate, your time's up. We're running the business. Let us pay you out and don't worry about it anymore, kind of thing.
And moving on from there.
Yeah, those documents should, again, detail how the business is to be valued, what the time frame is for how long do you have to be away for, versus you can come back, versus when they say, no, that's it, we're paying you out.
These are important discussions, and thank you for highlighting them for us, and also creating the resource which people will go through and tick them off as they take these steps. So we really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
And so you, my lovely listener, if this has got you concerned and you realise there are many steps to take, well, that is fantastic. You now have the motivation to move forward and take care of estate planning for this wonderful business that you have spent so much time and energy and effort in creating. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Less Than 15. Have a wonderful day. Take care. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Less Than 15 and have a fresh idea or two to take action on. Hit the subscribe button so you catch every bite-sized business bulletin. And we'd love you to leave a review or perhaps share the episode with a friend. Less Than 15 is brought to you by Accountants and Business Advisors DFK Australia New Zealand, helping business owners make better decisions through local knowledge, national connections, and global reach. We'll be back next week with more valuable insights to help you and your business grow.